Now, civil rights groups do a lot of good. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But of course, not everything that they do is for the benefit of the people that they're trying to help. Now, there's a recent report in The Intercept by Lee Fong that talks about how many of the leading civil rights groups that, of course, do great work in advancing the causes of minority groups in America are now cheering on the change to eliminate net neutrality. Fong writes that leading civil rights groups who many years have been heavily bankrolled by the telecommunications industry are now signaling their support for Donald Trump's promised rollback of the Obama administration's net neutrality rules, which of course prevent internet service providers from prioritizing some content providers over others. Basically, those who can afford to pay higher fees for that same speed. Now, the Obama administration's FCC established net neutrality by reclassifying high-speed internet as a regulated phone-like telecommunications service, as opposed to a mostly unregulated information service. The recent classification was cheered by advocates for a free and open internet. I'm one of them. And look, a lot of progressives were like, yes, we need a free and open internet. We agree with net neutrality. Great. And look, this is a fight that we won, not just because we had grassroots support, but also you had some giant web-based companies. You had Google and Netflix and other giant corporations that actually were on the right side. So credit there. Now, however, since Trump is in office, he was able to put in a new FCC commissioner, a man named by the name of Ajit Pai. Now, Ajit Pai is a former Verizon attorney, so he's obviously on the side of the telecommunication industry. Now, he is pushing to repeal the net neutrality reform by rolling back that reclassification. And he's getting help not only from a legion of telecom lobbyists, of course, but from some of these civil rights groups. Oh boy. Now, we already know that, of course, telecom companies, AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, of course, we're all about killing net neutrality because they stand to make a lot of money, as well as slow down sites that might be critical towards these same companies, costing them, of course, views and traffic, and having the effect of basically shutting down people that they might not agree with who cannot or will not pay their toll rates for that faster speed. They're slowing other sites down. But now, of course, they have the civil rights groups on their side as well. So let me go through some of those. In a joint letter released last week, the NAACP, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the OCA, formerly known as the Organization for Chinese Americans, the National Urban League, and other civil rights organizations are against net neutrality. They criticize the jurisdictional and classification problems that plagued the last FCC. A reference, of course, to the legal mechanism used by the Obama administration to achieve the goal of net neutrality. Basically, the letter states, instead of classifying broadband as a public utility, open internet rules should be written by a congressional statute. Now, what does that mean? How is that different than the FCC having the power to reclassify? Well, essentially, they're going to give it back to Congress, the Republican-controlled Congress, the Congress that is bought by telecom companies. You see where this is going? Oh, boy. Now, this is, of course, a precise approach that is favored by the telecom industry. Now, look, let me ask you, if you don't think this is a problem, do you think the Republicans wouldn't rule in favor of big corporations? Not only that, of course, but some Democrats, too, that are also bought by large TV networks that have seen their ratings plummet, among young people especially, who now get a lot of their entertainment online. For example, Netflix and YouTube. Then, of course, you also have cable news companies that have taken a hit, which has a corporate establishment bias, so people are getting more of their news from independent media online, such as Young Turks, Jim Black, Secular Talk, etc., right? All these different online news organizations. Now, of course, these big cable companies and news organizations, they despise that. Because, look, if you have independent outlets that are actually progressive, well, you're going to get a more progressive view. You're going to counter the establishment corporate narrative that you see on everyday news. So, of course, Republicans and people who are against progressives will try to go and basically eliminate net neutrality so that they can have their own ideological advantage. So that's what we have. And look, it's really hard to not see that the Republicans would do this. They're absolutely going to do this. And it's very sad to see that there are civil rights groups that are cheering this on. Fong also points out that it's not the first time the civil rights groups have engaged in lobbying debates unrelated to their core missions, but in favor of corporate donors. At a time when the OCA received major funding from Southwest Airlines, for example, the group filed a regulatory letter on behalf of the airline in support of Southwest's bid to open flights at a Houston airport. The NAACP, after receiving financial backing from Walmart, helped the retail chain during its contentious bid to open stores in New York City. So, look, these groups are helping their donors do things that aren't quite related to their core mission. I mean, how does opening up flights in Houston for Southwest Airlines helping Chinese Americans? I don't seem to see a reason. Now, look, I could see the Walmart opening up in New York City, possibly helping the black community if they open them up in largely African-American areas. Well, maybe helping with jobs, but again, those are low-paying Walmart jobs. Not exactly a huge help. So, look, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I can't really say. Now, Fong goes into where the letter came from. Now, last week's letter was organized by the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, the MMTC. Now, that's a group that's funded by the telecom industry that has previously encouraged civil rights groups to oppose net neutrality. MMTC in previous years was reported receiving about a third of its budget from industry-sponsored events. Its annual summit, which was held last week, was made possible by a $100,000 sponsorship from Comcast and AT&T, as well as a $75,000 sponsorship from Charter Communications and Verizon. So, look, you got to follow the money. The MMTC, which acts on the needs of telecom lobbyists, has been accused of, quote, astroturf lobbying by creating the appearance of grassroots support for the industry. And we've seen this before. No, we've got so much grassroots support that we paid. But it's grassroots. I don't think you understand what that word means. So, look, again, follow the money. It's always simple. When you see something going on, you've got to follow the money. And look, some of these groups, of course, are saying, no, it's not about the money, it's not the money. We actually have some concerns with net neutrality. Really? Well, okay, what's concerns? Well, in one filing made in 2010, the NAACP signed on to an argument from MMTC that net neutrality reforms were a waste of resources because the FCC could focus more on, or should focus more on, pressing racial discrimination and exclusionary hiring and promotion practices of certain Silicon Valley high-tech companies. In a separate filing in 2014, MMTC and the NAACP argued that reclassification would threaten the, quote, fragile state of minority engagement in the digital ecosystem. So let me address that first one, right? Basically, they're saying we shouldn't focus on doing net neutrality because we have other things to do. If we focus on net neutrality, we can't talk about any of the racial issues, which are significant issues in Silicon Valley. We can't do that. We cannot talk and chew gum at the same time. Pretty sure you can. It's actually fairly easy. Saying that you can't do both, and that's why you should oppose net neutrality, is absolutely ridiculous. And on the second issue, look, reclassification in the enforcement of net neutrality rules, that actually makes everybody on the internet equal. Whether or not you're an African American that's got a channel, or a company that relies on the internet, or if you're Chinese American, or if you're some white pasty guy like me. We're all equal on the internet. Isn't that actual equality? That everybody is treated equally on the internet, no matter what their views or their race or their classification, whatever. We're all supposed to be equal on the internet. That's what net neutrality means. The entire mission of the NAACP is supposed to ensure that black people attain equality. And yet, here they are against net neutrality, something that actually is supposed to foster equality on the internet. That's insanity. And look, again, I'm being critical of this, but I have to remind you, most of the NAACP's work is great, and I support them, but not on this subject. And again, it followed the money. The NAACP, which signed letters in opposing net neutrality, both times the rule was proposed by the Obama administration, has named AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast as corporate fundraising partners. After the NAACP endorsed Comcast's merger with NBC, Comcast disclosed that the NAACP was one of the recipients of a $1.8 billion in funds doled out to various community groups. So they received a huge amount of money. The Asian American groups on the letter, including the OCA and the Americans Advancing Justice, have similar ties to the largest telecom firms. Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast, and the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, a trade group for the telecom industry, are listed as members of the corporate alliance of donors funding the AAGC, or JC. Comcast and Verizon sponsored OCA's annual gala last year. And the National Urban League received $1.2 million from Verizon in 2014 alone. As the Center for Public Integrity reported, senior officials from AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast have held positions on the National Urban League's board. Look, I understand that these groups do a lot of good work and that they do need funding to continue doing that work. But with everything, there's usually strings attached. And those strings, ironically, in the case of net neutrality, will hurt the very people that these groups set up or were set up to try and help. That's the sad thing about this story. That's why we cover this story. That's why I'm talking about this, because this is important. So look, if you're a supporter of these groups, they're not all bad. They will respond to public pressure. So go out there. You tell these groups. You support net neutrality. Get them on your side. Tell them to stop taking money from these corporations that have a vested interest in actually ending a free and open internet. And tell them, do the right thing on this issue, as you have on so many other issues. They'll respond to public pressure. So it's a time to start applying that pressure. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.